You're tuned in to Steve Megatron on Altered Geek.
Hello and welcome to Altered Geek. I am your sometimes host, longtime collaborator, Michael Powers. I am joined this week by your all the time host, Steve Megatron Phillips.
Yo.
We are continuing to roll right along here with the new format. Hope you guys are enjoying it. If you're not, let us know in the comments. And please send us stories that you would like us, news stories that you would like us to cover. Because, we like to keep this train rolling and we'd like to talk about what you want us to talk about. We'll share our opinions. So let us know on Facebook, Twitter, however you want to do it. Just let us know what it is you think would be interesting for us to talk about in geekdom. So on that note, I just want to, there was a little device that came out back in September. Some people were able to get one, some people weren't. I don't recall if we were ever able to actually record a podcast about it, Steve, but it was the Super Nintendo Classic.
Yeah, I remember us talking vaguely about it. I just don't remember us actually getting to talk about it.
I remember talking about the NES Mini a year ago, talking about what we liked and what we didn't like, and I think we had TFG1 Mike on that podcast too. I think I could be wrong on that one, but so a year went by. Nintendo released the Super Nintendo Mini. I was lucky enough. I don't even remember how I did it. Oh, that's right. I just kept hitting refresh on the Target homepage when they were doing their pre-orders, and somehow I got in. I got one. Okay. And the Super Nintendo for me, the NES is cool. Don't get me wrong. Was never a Genesis guy, but the Super Nintendo for me is like where my love for gaming like really took hold. All the games I remember fondly growing up and playing, like in my, as a kid in my teenage years and whatnot, all of those come from the Super Nintendo. And the games that they included with the NES, with the Super NES this time around, that it is not a bad lineup. It had almost every single game I remember fondly growing up, with the exception of one. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But man, I just had I knew immediately I had to have one because the Super NES was my system, and I told my wife when the NES came out, I said if they do a Super NES one, that's the one that we have to bend over backwards to get. Long story short, obviously I got one, but really I've made my wife play it more than I've played it, because she never had any experience with it.
Really?
So it's been, her first game system was a PlayStation.
Wow.
So she missed out on...
The SNES was so cool.
She missed out on the entire foundation of a cornerstone of gaming, if you will. But I've got her playing Earthbound.
Oh, nice.
Which I've never played. I just wanted her to play it because she likes role-playing games and she likes Pokemon. And I felt that Earthbound's aesthetic, its art style, is very close to Pokemon. From that top-down, you're playing as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying. I'm just saying, like, aesthetically, they look similar to each other. So she started playing that. She seemed to enjoy it, but she didn't want to play it when I wasn't around. And obviously my job doesn't allow me to play a lot of games. So that kind of went by the wayside. She has played a little bit of Super Mario World. But she gave up on that after she got her first game over screen. So it's a little bit of touch and go here. But do you have any fond memories of the Super Nintendo?
Man, I remember going over to my friend's house because at the time my dad had bought us a 486 DX4100 computer AMD system, like way back when. Yeah,
right over my head, man.
It dates me, doesn't it? Anyways, it was pre-Pentium. The I had a friend across the street. Point I mentioned about the computer thing is because we weren't allowed to have a game system because we had a PC. Went over to a friend's house because he had a SNES and we used to hang out like at school, and then after school I'd go over there and we'd play some like Aladdin. Remember the old SNES Aladdin game?
Yep.
That was pretty much one of the games that I got kind of hooked on the system with, and then I believe there was a couple of Batman games I'd played, and there was some other game that I just can't remember the name of it right now, but can't even describe it. I remember Street Fighter 2.
Okay.
But a variety of those type of games. They were based off of properties that were either another game or a TV series or a film from being a kid and everything. Ninja Turtles and whatnot. So I used to go play a lot of that when I'd go over there. And I just remember I loved the controller, like the way that it played. It was so much nicer than when I played my cousin's Sega Genesis.
Oh God.
Which I've owned. Funny thing is I've owned an SNES in one time, as well as a Sega Genesis and a variety of other Nintendo systems. But the SNES always was pretty well off, even for the time with getting into the disc-based systems coming along. So. Yeah,
there was a lot of games like towards the end there that they pushed that system to its absolute limits with, like, you know, games like Star Fox.
Well, and you had Mega Man X too, like X, before it went PlayStation. I used to play all the Mario games as well on the SNES, but yeah. No, like I said, that's the system that I grew up with, and I absolutely love it. And the, you know, true to form, you know, I've played the Super Nintendo games like with an emulator, like with using like a PlayStation controller or like a Xbox controller on my computer, but there's nothing like playing a Super Nintendo game with a Super Nintendo controller. I used to have a SNES controller that you could plug into the computer, and it was like with the old game ports on the back of the system. Back before USB existed. And I had to like kind of program it in the control panel and all that fun stuff. But yeah, I used to play my emulators doing that as well, and a lot of Dragon Ball Z games and other properties, because I used to do the whole emulator thing. Had a whole emulator website to play, and
that's right.
Yeah, that was one of my early websites after I started a Dragon Ball Z site. So, yeah, that's a long time ago. But anyways, I think I still have those emulators somewhere, which is funny. But but yeah, I used to have the controller, and the controller was so... That was one of the things about Nintendo, is a lot of their earlier controllers from like the SNES and the GameCube were probably my two favorite controllers that I've ever used.
I think I'm the only person on the planet that likes the N64 controller.
I did like the N64 controller because you had that one stick in the middle that kind of made it so that you could kind of hold it wherever.
Yep.
And it shortened the distance between your hands.
Yep.
So I did like that. I just thought I was the only weird one that didn't mind it as much as people complained about it.
So, you know, I said that the library on the Super Nintendo Classic, you know, it was pretty
huge.
good. For
that time.
Well, right, but I'm saying like the Super Nintendo Classic, the Mini, like the collection of games that they give you is actually is pretty good. There isn't anything that I would remove, and I've racked my brain since I got it in September. There's only one game that I can think of that it's missing. Like for me personally, that it is missing, and it's the one game that I love. It's the one game that always goes in my number one video game spot of all time. And I still have my original cartridge from 1995.
Nice. I have a Super Famicom cartridge of the same game that's still in the box.
Wow.
I have obviously I have the Nintendo DS version of the same game. I've bought this game many times over, and that is Chrono Trigger.
Okay. Same guy that did Dragon Ball Z aesthetics.
Yep. Yes. Chrono Trigger probably needs no introduction among like the geeks that might listen to this, but like it was done by like a dream team. Like you had Square, like you had all like the best JRPG composer, the best character design, and story and mechanics, and they all came together and they made this wonderful RPG. Which up to this point I never got the point of it. Like I watched my cousin play Final Fantasy 3 or Final Fantasy 6 for the hardcore guys, but I didn't understand the appeal of it. It wasn't until I was shown Chrono Trigger and its time traveling mechanics that I absolutely fell in love with the game. Like it is probably it is my favorite game of all time. Like there is no number one. There's Chrono Trigger and then there's everything else. And that was the one game that was missing. And I read on the line that there was a way that to hack the NES Mini and thus the Super NES Mini, because they are the exact same machine. They just have a different shell. I'm 90% certain that I could load NES ROMs onto the Super NES Mini and they'll play. It's literally the same board inside, and they just put a different shell. They put the Super NES shell on the outside of it. So that being said, I was excited at the possibility of adding Chrono Trigger to my SNES Mini, because I tried to get my wife to play it on the DS, but she said that she couldn't get into it because she was playing it on a DS. But this is also my wife, and for some reason she can play Pokemon games just fine. So anyways, I thought if I can get it on this system, I can get it on the TV, and maybe she can enjoy it that way. So I didn't. One of the first articles I read with regards to hacking the NES or the SNES Mini literally started off with, there is a chance of bricking your device. Okay?
Interesting.
And for me, that is the brightest red warning flag to not do something. I mean, I've bricked an iPhone to the point where I had to get it replaced. I've bricked my first Mac, but I was able to fix it, thankfully, to the guys at the Apple Help Desk. But I generally try anything that says brick, I stay away from it. It's one of the reasons why I never jailbroke an iPhone. Okay, just not worth the hassle. So I told myself, and I told Allie, my wife, if we can find another SNES Mini, I want to buy it to hack it. Okay, because I didn't want to brick it, the one that I had, and not be able to find one ever again.
Well, not only that, then if you've been playing it, you lose your same games.
Right, and with the NES Mini, like my fears were based off of what the SNES were based off of the NES Mini being scarce, right? Like you never saw one in the wild. People just ended up with them somehow.
It was kind of like trying to find a Mewtwo in the game.
Yeah, and they ended up being like $300 on Amazon and eBay, right? Yeah. So I got my hands on an SNES Mini at cost, or at the MSRP. So I was like, I'm not wrecking this one unless I can get another one. So yesterday, thankfully, because I live in a metropolitan area that isn't being run into the ground, we have access to Prime now. And they put up on Twitter, they said, we have SNES Classics in stock at these locations, and it was Columbus, Ohio. So I saw the tweet like an hour later, and I was like, oh, there's no way they have them. But I went online, and they did, and I bought one. So I set out to try to hack it. Hacking anything is really easy to do from a Windows standpoint.
Yeah.
Okay. because everybody writes things for Windows.
Well, not only that, but you can access a lot of areas that you may not necessarily see on a Mac, kind of stuff.
Right. So I set out to, I didn't want to install Windows, so I was like, okay, what can I do to not have to install Windows? So I installed a VirtualBox, and I found a legal 90-day copy of, was it called, like Win 10 Edge? Or something like that? Like it's Windows 10 Edge? I don't know. It's one of their crazy versions, but I have it for 90 days. So I installed that. And I'm following these instructions on how to do this from a Mac. So I've got it on the VirtualBox. I've got Windows installed. I plug the Mini in. I follow all the instructions. But it won't load any games. So I don't know that it's actually working. But my computer says it is. And I think part of the problem was because I was running it in a VirtualBox. The system reboots after you do the hack. Right? And the VirtualBox no longer recognizes what's hooked up to the USB. So unless you tell it that it needs to be reconnected to the USB. So there's this weird like handshake where something doesn't actually finish. So then I was like, I filled with it some more, tried it a couple different ways. I tried it from my work computer, which is a Windows machine, but it's a work computer. So I can't install the hacking program.
Yeah.
Like it just, the semantic thing they have on there just immediately deletes the file. So I was like, okay. And I wasn't going to do anything. I was just going to wait until I went home, use my parents' Windows computer. And then I set out to install Windows using Boot Camp on my Mac. Like I physically installed a copy of Windows on my Mac. Just to put one game on my SNES Mini. And I'm constantly blown away at how long it takes to install Windows.
Maybe it's just that hardware, because I've never had it take very long on an actual... Like, do you have a solid-state drive?
No.
Oh.
I have a hybrid drive.
Oh. Well, it should have still installed fast.
But I did it on... it feels like it takes a long time when you're waiting for something. Like, you just got to do this one thing. But it took me, like, a little under 4 hours, like to get it, to get everything like kind of up and running to where it was usable. Because one, I borrowed a copy of Windows 7 from the internet. And the first one that I borrowed didn't install properly, so I had to uninstall it, find another copy to borrow, and install that one. Luckily, that one worked. But the end of the long story short is, like, if you have Windows, it is less than 5 minutes to hack and install whatever games you want on the SNES Mini.
That's nice.
And the app that they made is pretty bulletproof. Excuse me, is pretty bulletproof. Like, the step one is making a dump of the ROM that is installed. Like the instructions say back this, like click, do this, back it up, email it to yourself so you have a copy of it, because this is how you fix it if something goes wrong. And to be honest with you, I am amazed that I did not brick the thing or lose any data, like trying to force it to work from a Mac side of things. It was just so weird that I couldn't get it to work. But
yeah, that's a little strange.
As soon as I got it on the Windows thing, but I also installed Windows on my old Mac. Like I was getting ready to like install Windows on both of my Macs and see which one could install it faster. But I wanted to just use Windows 7, and my new Mac will only take Windows 8 or higher.
Interesting.
And so I was like, I am not familiar with either one of those, so I don't want that. But I did leave the Windows partition on my old computer, so now I can play PC games.
Hey, there is a bonus to that.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like completely bad, and it's like I said, it feels like it takes a long time when you're just like there's just something really quick that you want to do, and it wasn't like I sat there and stared at it the whole time. Like my wife and I were watching TV shows or YouTube while it was installing, but it just feels like it was going really slow. And I also think there's something wrong with the Mac that I installed it on. Like it's on its way out. I think the fans in it died.
Oh wow!
Like a year ago. Luckily, I can replace them. I just have to find them online. So, on that note, just gonna put this out there. I know we don't have very many people that listen right now, but this might get you to comment. I have a spare Super Nintendo Mini in my possession, still in the box. I am not a scalper. I will sell it to somebody for $80 plus the cost of shipping. But it's got to go to a good home. And if I find out you scalped it, I'll never sell you anything ever again.
So there.
So with that in mind, you can let us know what you guys think of the SNES Mini. Like I said, this news is really late, but we haven't really had a chance to talk about it until now. And the reason we're talking about it now is because I finally hacked mine. But just real quick, the hacking app is really slick. So you have to go and find the ROM yourself. But once you do and you put it in there, it goes and pulls like basically the IMDb information for the game. So it goes and gets the date, and then there's literally a button that says Google search, and it does a Google image search for the artwork. So it loads into the dashboard on the SNES Mini like it's a proper game, like it was supposed to be there from the beginning, which for me is totally awesome. The hack doesn't change anything about the way that the SNES Mini works, which I think is like the greatest thing. Like I think those are the greatest things when you don't like you add functionality without making it noticeable that you added functionality.
Totally.
Because sometimes when you hack these things or you jailbreak them or whatever, you end up making them look completely different, right? And they kind of look a little janky. I'm glad that they didn't. The guy that made this app didn't do that. So awesome on you. So yeah, that's my my thoughts on the Super Nintendo as a whole. Gushed a little bit about Chrono Trigger there and my adventures in hacking it. My brother-in-law keeps suggesting other games that I should probably load on there, but the games he's mentioned, I'm just kind of like, I have no love for those games. I might add the rest of the Mega Man X games on there.
Oh, that would be awesome.
And the Donkey Kong Country games on there. Because they only put Mega Man X and Donkey Kong Country.
They should have put all the Mega Man X that they have.
Which is 3,
SNES.
right?
Yeah, up to 3.
Yeah. So, yeah. So let us know what you think of the SNES Mini. If you have one, if you want one, if you're trying to get one for the holidays. You can let us know on Facebook or on the website or on Twitter. You can hashtag this one Altered Hack. You can follow me on Twitter. My handle is at BoothNinja81. And yours, Steve?
At SCP-21.
Until next week, or next time,
get altered,
get geeky with the Altered Geeks.